Hi everyone, my name is Adam, property consultant, transaction advisor, and CEO of Mr. T Real Estate Sri Lanka. And welcome to yet another real estate blog. And today I'm going to talk to you about selling a property in a buyer's market. How to sell property in a buyer's market. Have you noticed a lull in the real estate market? Have you seen a property being advertised in the market repeatedly on many websites by many agents? Sometimes it stays in the market, nobody is buying it. Have you seen less interest levels from clients for your property? If you have been trying to sell your property and if you have seen disappointingly low levels of interest, nobody calling, nobody inquiring, people coming to see the property but not buying, and have you had your property in the market for a very long time? Then if the answer is yes, you are in a buyer's market. What does it mean to be in a buyer's market? What is the definition of a buyer's market? I'll give you some quick tips and quick tricks with regard to identifying whether you are in a buyer's market or not. Time is a great indicator. If your property is not sold inside the first 3 months, then naturally you are not in a buyer's market. But if your property stays for over 3 months, up to 2 years or 3 years, chances are that you are in a buyer's market. A buyer's market is where the supply of properties is high and the demand for these properties is very low. It's a very simple principle between demand and supply. When the supply is high, the demand is low. When the demand is high, the supply is low. So in a buyer's market, the supply is high and therefore the demand is low. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is that there is a big risk when it comes to flipping. In a buyer's market, flipping is a very risky choice. If you are trying to flip in a buyer's market, that can be an issue. Might even fall into trouble. So be careful if you're flipping. Right. So the question is, how to sell property in a buyer's market? You have two options. Option 1, don't sell. Option 2, sell. Now let me run through both options. If you're going ahead with option 1, which is don't sell, what else can you do? You have the option of renting. If you are not interested in renting, then you have the option of keeping it as it is or even moving into that property. Option 2 is where you actually want to sell in a buyer's market. Now this is very tricky. If you want to sell in a buyer's market, your property has to be in immaculate condition. There cannot be cracks on the wall, there cannot be leaks, there cannot be any negative aspects to the property. If you have furniture in the property and if you are planning to sell your property with the furniture, then you need to make sure your furniture is looking good. You cannot sell a property in a buyer's market with bad furniture. You have to be careful when you're marketing the property. Your property has to be presentable. It has to look good. It has to look great. Because in a buyer's market, there are a number of factors that determine the sale of a property. For example, the competition level is high. When I say competition, I'm not referring to competition among agents or competition among buyers. I am referring to competition among properties. You have very many properties which are just like your property. That is why we call it a buyer's market. There are lots of properties. There are very few takers. That's what we call a buyer's market. So making your property look nice is your priority. That is the first thing you need to do if you are selling in a buyer's market. Do a pros and cons analysis. Check on your property. Are you selling an older property? Are you selling a newly built property? Are you selling a renovated property? If you're selling without furniture, then you need to make sure your property looks nice. Now, the color of the walls even is very important. To be on the safe side, sticking to white color is advised because white color makes it look brighter and white color also makes it look more spacious. Clients like it when it's white. It allows them to visualize. It allows them to imagine what things they can do with the property when it's white. And clients will not complain if you have white. So that's the other thing. After you decide on the presentation part and you clear out all these small things, the clutter, the bad furniture, the repair, if your kitchen is not looking great, if your kitchen is looking outdated, you might want to consider doing it up. You might want to even replace the pantry area. You might want to put a new pantry or refurbish the kitchen. You might want to make every inch of your property, every corner of your property look good. Remember, the goal is to impress the client when they enter your property. You don't want to turn off a client. That is very important. Right, so now you've done all of that. The presentation aspect is sorted out. The next thing is to find an agent. Find a reliable agent. Find an agent who can be your partner in crime to sell this property. You should look at treating this whole process of selling the property as a project. And your agent, whoever you select, is your project manager. You have to sit with your agent and you have to run through the plan of selling it. You are in a buyer's market. You're on a mission to sell a property. You're not just looking at advertising the property, expecting buyers to come one by one and say, okay, I'm interested in your property. That's not going to happen. You might not get a buyer for a long time and you might not get a good offer for a long time. So in a buyer's market, the second thing you have to do after you sort out your property, make it look nice, is to get hold of a reliable agent. Once you get hold of a reliable agent, the third thing, the most important part, is the photography behind the property. You have to make sure you get it done well. If your agent is not doing it right, consider supporting your agent in hiring a photographer, a videographer, or even if you are in a position to get this done separately and give the relevant photographs or the relevant videos, the whole thing to the agent, that would be fine. Presentation translates into photography and videography before the client enters the property. This is very important. When I say photography and videography, I'm referring to a day's work. I'm not referring to somebody coming in, spending half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours at the property. No. You have to shoot the property in the morning hours, you have to shoot the property in the afternoon hours, and you also have to shoot the property in the evening hours to capture the best shots possible. Because the property looks different during all 3 times of the day. That's important. So get this done. Thereafter, your agent will do his magic. But again, you have to be very careful with a few more things. You're in a buyer's market. Remember that. Keep that at the back of your head. In a buyer's market, a lot of things can happen. Historically, research shows that a buyer's market is something that can last for as long as 10 years. Now, when I say buyer's market, I'm not saying that your country or my country, which is Sri Lanka, is going to be a buyer's market forever. There are certain locations in certain parts of the country which have demand. But if your property is not in one of those areas, you will know. Time is your greatest indicator. Time is your greatest enemy and time is also your greatest weapon. If you are unable to get your property sold inside the first 3 months, you know for sure this is a buyer's market. Strategy has to change, plan has to change, everything has to change. If you manage to sell your property inside the first 3 months, fantastic. Job well done. you are in probably what we call a seller's market. There are locations in the country which can be called or classified as seller's market, but there are very few in my part of the world, that is. So if you're a seller, here's a few more things you have to look at when you look at selling a property in a buyer's market. Flexibility. As a property seller, you have to be extremely flexible. This is because when a client comes in, and when they come in, we do not know when the other client is going to come in or when the next client is going to come in. When you get that first client and you get that hunch that this guy or this person is serious and they look like they want it, and if they give you an offer, what are you going to do? Are you going to take that offer? Are you going to reject the offer? Are you going to accept the offer? What is your attitude? Now, when it comes to the aspect of a client placing an offer, there is one thing that you too would have done when you sat with your agent, and that is setting the price. Remember, the backdrop is buyer's market. We are selling a property in a buyer's market. What are the key things in a buyer's market? You make your property look presentable. Fantastic. It's done. Setting the price. How do you set a price in a buyer's market? What happens in a buyer's market? How is price set in a buyer's market? I'll tell you. Assuming that your property is priced at X value. How do you know it's priced at X value? You will consult your agent, or you will do a property valuation, and you will arrive at a certain market value. Now you know we are in a buyer's market, and you have the market value which is X. When you're setting your price, you have to go below X. It can be 10%, it can be 5%, it can be 15%, it can be 20%. The idea is to make it attractive. The goal is to get over the challenge of selling in a buyer's market. Because if you don't, your property is going to rot in the market. It's going to sit in the market. It's going to stay in the market for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You might as well consider a reasonably low offer. Take that money, get your job done, and move on rather than waste a good 2-3 years looking for that golden offer which you have in mind for your price, and you never get it sometimes. I'm going to tell you some classic stories of my own experience in a buyer's market. A few years back, I had a property, a beautiful house in a nice, lovely neighborhood, a super residential area. The property at that time, the seller wanted 75 million rupees. I, with all the hard work and the marketing with my team, managed to scrape a buyer. And I got a concrete offer to the client from the buyer for 72 million. Mind you, this property is priced at 75 million. This is a beautiful house in a nice area, in a residential neighborhood. A 75 million property. Buyer brings in an offer of 72 million. And guess what? The seller, unaware of the fact that this is a buyer's market, says no. Wants us to get slightly closer to 75 million. The buyer walks away. He has many properties. He tells us he's seen other properties. He's reconsidering. He's looking around. A year later, we finally get in touch with the seller, asking if the property is still available. The answer is yes. 6 months later, when we checked with the property seller, he tells us, I sold it for 60 million. And we are thinking, we had a sitting client, 72 million. After 1.5 years, you sold it for far less. Now, if you had only accepted that first offer, in a buyer's market, that offer can be your best offer. Remember that. A bird in hand is worth two in the bush. If you had taken that offer, you would have got more money, you would have not had to wait for 1.5 years, and you could have done more things. But the market squeezed you. The market didn't let you get it your way. Why? Because it's a buyer's market. That was one classic example. We use it all the time when we talk to clients. Another classic example was a luxury apartment. Again, in a very high-profile neighborhood. We had a 95 million apartment entering the market for 95 million. Months pass by, and then what happens? Offers come for 85 million, for 88 million, for 78 million, and the seller doesn't budge. He wants something close to 95 million. Many months later, the seller gets desperate. He wants to sell it. And finally, we send an offer of 71 million rupees. And he says yes. A 95 million property getting sold for 71 million in a buyer's market. These are consequences, my friends. Consequences of not deciding at the right time. Consequences of not jumping into the boat when you had to. Consequences of absolute ignorance. Remember, your first offer can be your best offer. But at the same time, it can also be your last offer. So, consider these examples and behave and think wisely when you're selling your property. Few other things I want to touch on. When you're selling your property, there are a few exceptions. There is something called the distressed sale. Now, a buyer's market can make you desperate, and that can in turn convert your property sale into a distressed sale. 70 million rupees for a 95 million property. It results in a distressed sale. Now, you don't want to get into a stage where you're a distressed seller. You're frustrated, you're trying hard to sell, it's taken a long time, and it's not selling. And then you're like, okay, whoever gives me an offer, I might as well give it. And you give it off. So a distressed sale is where you're desperate to sell, where the seller wants to get rid of the property at any cost. In a buyer's market, you get most people who are looking for a distressed sale. That is why we call it a buyer's market, because the buyer calls the shots. The buyer is the ultimate dictator in a buyer's market. It's their money because they know there are very few takers. And that's why you have to be smart. You have to make sure you present it well. You have to make sure you get hold of a reliable agent. And you have to make sure you get it right. And you have to have a timeline to get the deal done. If it stays for too long, if you get offers and you start rejecting, if it takes a long time, like the two classical stories I just shared with you, it creates uncertainty in the minds of clients, the minds of buyers. And this uncertainty spreads in the market like a virus. And then it creates a stigma around the property. And word spreads fast. Rumors start to spread faster. And eventually your property gets victimized. You're unable to get it sold. Even if there is a client who's interested, because of the stigma around the property, because of what's being told around by people in the market, your property begins to lose the traction. It begins to lose the interest. And buyers tend to look at other properties. And your property is just sidelined. So don't let that happen in a buyer's market. If you're selling in a buyer's market, it's a challenge. Get your project manager. In other words, your real estate agent. Get them involved. Be a team. Meet them often. Discuss with them. See how best you can play around. Because in a buyer's market, the buyer is not going to come, spend a week or two, and quickly go for the property. A buyer will take 6 to 8 months to scan the property, to negotiate, to squeeze the agent or the seller, bring the price down. The buyers will do that. In a buyer's market, that is a common practice among buyers. They will take their own cool time because they know there are no takers. So you have to make sure you negotiate wisely, you negotiate smartly, and you have to be flexible. Sometimes you have to even be flexible with the payment terms. If a buyer comes in and says, okay, I'll take your property, but I'll give you a reservation fee now, we'll conclude the deal in 2 months. Go for it. You're in a buyer's market. If you know you're in a buyer's market, if your property is there for more than 3 months, and if a buyer comes in and says, okay, I need this property, but my money is coming later, we can sign an agreement, I can pay you a deposit, go for it. Don't let it slip. Because you know you're in a buyer's market and things can get really dicey in a buyer's market. So that's something important. Price your property below the market value. That is key. That is absolutely key in a buyer's market. It could be 10%, 15%, 20%, but price it below the market value. Buyers will be interested. Trust me, buyers do a lot of research before they enter into negotiations. They go around, they know the tons of properties that are available in your area, they figure it out, and that's how they give you their offer. You might want to counter offer once or twice, but be very flexible. Do not lose the client. That is very important. Price it right, play it right. Never ever overprice your property in a buyer's market. Do not make the mistake of pricing your property above the market value or even keeping it at the market value. You will notice that it will take time. If you're somebody who's already sold a property in the buyer's market, feel free to comment below and share your experience with us. We will see if we can make more content on how you can sell in a buyer's market, share more tips and tricks with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media platforms. The links are below. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if there are any more videos you want us to make on certain topics touching real estate marketing, please feel free to comment and let us know. We'll be happy to make more videos. Thank you for watching.